The study of this universal form begins from the soul, meaning from the from the feet. Above the soles are the feet. Above the feet are the calves. Above the calves, the cows. Above the cows are the knees, and above the knees are the thighs. Thus, the parts of the universal body, one after another, are described herein. The knees are the place of birds, and above that are the variety of air. The birds fly over the mountain, and above the birds are the varieties of air. So that's interesting. There are varieties of air. Text 24. Holy Maharaj saw beneath the garments of the lords who acts wonderfully the evening twilight. In the Lord's private parts, he saw the Prajapatis, and in the round portion of the waist, he saw himself with his confidential associates. In the Lord's navel, he saw the sky. On the Lord's waist, he saw the seven oceans. And on the Lord's bosom, he saw all the clusters of stars. Wow. Okay. Second. Text 25 to 29. Second. Let's see. My dear king, on the heart of Lord Murari, he saw religion. On the chest, both pleasing words and truthfulness. In the mind, the moon. On the bosom, the goddess of fortune, with a lotus flower in her hand. On the neck, all the Vedas and all sound vibrations. On the arms, all the demigods headed by King Indra. In both ears, all the directions. On the head, the upper planetary systems. On the hair, the clouds. In the nostrils, the wind. On the eyes, the sun. And in the mouth, fire. From his words came all the Vedic mantras. On his tongue was the demigod of water, Varunadeva. On his eyebrows were the regulative principles, and on his eyelids were day and night. When his eyes were open, it was daytime, and when they were closed, it was night. On his forehead was anger, and on his lips was greed. O king, in his touch were lusty desires. In his semen were all the waters. On his back was irreligion. And in his wonderful activities or steps was the fire of sacrifice. On his shadow was death. In his smile was the illusory energy. And on the hairs of his body, all the drugs and herbs. In his veins were all the rivers. On his nails were all the stones. In his intelligence were Lord Brahma, the demigods, and the great saintly persons. And throughout his entire body, the senses were all living entities, moving and stationary, Bali Maharaja thus saw everything in the gigantic body of the Lord. Text number 30. O king, when all the demons, the followers of Maharaj Bali, saw the universal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who held everything within his body, when they saw in the Lord's hand his disc known as the Sudarshana Chakra, which generates intolerable heat, and when they heard the tumultuous sound of his bow, all of these caused lamentation within their hearts. Text 31. The Lord's conch shell, named Panchajanya, which made sounds like that of a cloud, the very forceful club named Komodaki, and the sword named Vidyadhara, with a shield decorated with hundreds of moon-like spots, and also Akshayasa Yaka, Akshayasa, Akshayasayaka, the best of quivers. All these appeared together to offer prayers to the Lord. Text 32 and 33. These associates, headed by Sunanda and other chief associates, and accompanied by all the predominating deities of the various planets, offered prayers to the Lord, who wore a brilliant helmet, bracelets, and glittering earrings that resembled fish. On the Lord's bosom were the lock of hair called Shivatsa, and the transcendental jewel named Kostuba. He wore a yellow garment covered by a belt, and he was decorated by a flower garment surrounded by bees, manifesting him in this way, O king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose activities are wonderful, covered the entire surface of the earth with one footstep, the sky with his body, and all the directions with his arms. Purport by the Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. One might argue, since Bali Maharaj promised Vamana Deva only the land occupied by his steps, why did Lord Vamanadev occupy the sky also? Excuse me. In this regard, Srila Jiva Goswami says that the steps include everything, downward and upward. When one stands up, he certainly occupies certain parts of the sky and certain portions of the earth below his feet. Thus, there was nothing uncommon for the Supreme Personality of Godhead when he occupied the entire sky with his body. Text 34. As the Lord took his second step, he covered the heavenly planets, and not even a spot remained for the third step. For the Lord's foot extended higher and higher beyond Maharloka, Chanaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka. Oh, well, that covers everything. Purport. When the Lord's footstep exceeded the height of all the lokas, including Maharloka, Jnanaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka, his nails certainly pierced the covering of the universe. The universe is covered by the five material elements. Bumir, Apo, Nalu, Vayu, Kam. As stated in the Shastra, these elements are in layers, each 10 times thicker than the previous one. Nonetheless, the nails of the Lord pierced through all these layers and made a hole, penetrating into the spiritual world. From this hole, the water of the Ganges infiltrated into the material world. And therefore it is said, Pada Naka Nira Janita Jana Pavana. Dasavatara Sutra 5. Because the Lord kicked a hole in the covering of the universe, the water of the Ganges came into this material world to deliver all the fallen souls. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 8th canto, 20th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bali Maharaja Surrenders the Universe. Well, that's very good because that proves that the universe belongs to Krishna, not to anyone else. Thus end the Bhagavad Gita, thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 8th canto, 20th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bali Maharaj Surrenders the Universe. Chapter 21, Bali Maharaj arrested by the Lord. This chapter describes how Lord Vishnu, desiring to advertise the glories of Bali Maharaj, arrested him for not fulfilling his promise in regard to the Lord's third step. With the second step, the Supreme Personality of Godhead reached the topmost planet of the universe, Brahmaloka, which he diminished in beauty by the effulgence of his toenails. Thus, Lord Brahma, accompanied by great sages like Marichi and the predominating deities of all the higher planets, offered humble prayers and worship to the Lord. They washed the Lord's feet and worshipped him with all paraphernalia. Riksharaja Jambavan played his bugle to vibrate the glories of the Lord. When Bali Maharaja was deprived of all his possessions, the demons were very angry, although Bali Maharaja warned them not to do so. They took up weapons against Lord Vishnu. All of them were defeated, however, by Lord Vishnu's eternal associates. And in accordance with Bali Maharaja's order, they all entered the lower planets of the universe. Understanding Lord Vishnu's purpose, Garuda, the carrier of Lord Vishnu, immediately arrested Bali Maharaj with the ropes of Varuna. When Bali Maharaj was thus reduced to a helpless position, Lord Vishnu asked him for the third step of land. Because Lord Vishnu appreciated Bali Maharaj's determination and integrity, when Bali Maharaj was unable to fulfill his promise, Lord Vishnu ascertained that the place for him would be the planet Sutala, which is better than the planets of heaven. Text 1. Sukadeva Goswami continued, when Lord Brahma, who was born of a lotus flower, saw that the effulgence of his residence, Brahmaloka, had been reduced by the glaring effulgence from the toenails of Lord Vishnu. Sorry, Lord Vamanadeva. He approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Brahma was accompanied by all the great sages, headed by Marichi, and by yogis like Sanandana. But in the presence of that glaring effulgence, O king, even Lord Brahma and his associates seemed insignificant. Text 2 and 3. Among the great personalities who came to worship the lotus feet of the Lord were those who had attained perfection in self-control and and uh, regulative principles, as well as experts in logic, history, general education, and the Vedic literature known as Kalpa, dealing with old historical incidents. One second. Others were experts in the Vedic corollaries, like Brahma Samhita. All the other knowledge of the Vedas, Sama, Yajur, Rig, and Atharva, and also the supplementary Vedic knowledge, Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, etc. Others were those who had been freed from the reactions to fruitive activities by transcendental knowledge, awakened by practice of yoga, and still others were those who had attained residence in Brahmaloka, not by ordinary karma, but by advanced Vedic knowledge. After devotedly worshipping the upraised lotus feet of the Supreme Lord with oblations of water, Lord Brahma, who was born of the lotus emanating from Lord Vishnu's navel, offered prayers to the Lord. Oh, well, that's very, very, very wonderful. Text 4. O king, the water from Lord Brahma's Kamandalu washed the lotus feet of Lord Vamanadeva, who is known as Urukrama, the wonderful actor. Thus, that water became so pure that it was transformed into the water of the Ganges, which went flowing down from the sky, purifying the three worlds like the pure fame of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Very nice. Purport. Here we understand that the Ganges began when the water from Lord Brahma's Kamandalu, that's his little, uh, his, that's his thing that keeps the water for him. Wash the lotus feet of Lord Vamanadeva. But in the fifth canto, it is stated that the Ganges began when Vamanadeva's left foot pierced the covering of the universe, so that the transcendental water of the causal ocean leaked through. And elsewhere, it is also stated that Lord Narayana appeared as the water of the Ganges. The water of the Ganges, therefore, is a combination of three transcendental waters, and thus the Ganges is able to purify the three worlds. This is a description given by Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura. Very good. Text 5. Lord Brahma and all the predominating deities of the various planetary systems began to worship Lord Vamanadeva. their supreme master, who had reduced himself from his high, all pervading form in his original form. They collected all the ingredients and paraphernalia for this wonderful worship. Purport: Vamanadeva first expanded himself to the universal form and then reduced himself to the original Vamana Rupa. Thus, he acted exactly like Lord Krishna, who, at the request of Arjuna, first showed his universal form and later resumed his original form as Krishna. The Lord can assume any form he likes, but his original form is that of Krishna. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. According to the capacity of the devotee, the Lord assumes various forms so that the devotee can handle him. This is his causeless mercy. When Lord Vamanadeva resumed his original form, Lord Brahma and his associates collected various paraphernalia for worship with which to please him. Text 6 and 7. They worship the Lord by offering fragrant flowers, water, hadya, and argya, sandalwood pulp, and alkuru pulp, incense, lamps, and fused rice, unbroken grains, fruits, roots, and sprouts. While so doing, they offered prayers indicating the glorious activities of the Lord and shouted Jaya, Jaya. They all danced, played instruments, sang, sounded conch shells, and beat kettle drums. In this way, worshiping the Lord. That sounds really like a lot of fun. Text 8. Jambavan, the king of the bears, also joined in the ceremony. Sounding his bugle in all directions, he declared a great festival for Lord Vamanadeva's victory. Text number 9. Yeah, text number 9. When the demoniac followers of Maharaj Bali saw that their master, who had been determined in performing sacrifice, had lost all his possessions to Vamanadeva, who had taken them away on the plea of begging 3 paces of land, they were very angry and spoke as follows. Text number 10. This Vamana is certainly not a Brahmana, but the best of the cheaters. Whoa, that's a terrible thing to say. Lord Vishnu, in other words, this Vamana is certainly not a Brahmana, but the best of cheaters, Lord Vishnu. Assuming the form of a Brahmana, he has covered his own form, and thus he is working for the interests of the demigods. Text number 11. Our Lord, Bali Maharaj, because of his position in performing the yajna, has given up the power to punish. Taking advantage of this, our eternal enemy, Vishnu, dressed in the form of a brahmachari beggar, has taken away all his possessions. Well, actually, that's a blessing. It's not really something bad. Of course, demons don't understand that. That's 12. Our Lord, Bali Maharaja, is always fixed in truthfulness. And this is especially so at present, since he has been initiated into performing a sacrifice. He is always kind and merciful toward the Brahmanas, and he cannot at any time speak lies. Oh, that's very good. Text number 13. One second. Therefore, it is our duty to kill this Vamana Deva, Lord Vishnu. It is our religious principle and the way to serve our master. After making this decision, the demoniac followers of Maharaj Bali took up their various weapons with a view to killing Vamana Deva. Well, they're not going to be successful. Text 14. O king, the demons, aggravated by their usual anger, took their lances and tridents in hand, and against the will of Bali Maharaja, they pushed forward to kill Lord Vamana Deva. Text 15. O king, when the associates of Lord Vishnu saw the soldiers of the demons coming forward in violence, they smiled. Taking up their weapons, they forbade the demons to continue their attempt. Text 16 and 17. Nanda, Sunanda, Jaya, Vijaya, Prabala, Bala, Kumuda, Kumudaksha, Vishwaksena, Patat Ridrat, Garuda, Jayanta, Shrutadeva, Pushpa Danta, and Satvata were all associates of Lord Vishnu. They were as powerful as 10,000 elephants, and now they began killing the soldiers of the demons. Text 18. When Bali Maharaja saw that his own soldiers were being killed by the associates of Lord Vishnu, he remembered the curse of Sukracharya and forbade his soldiers to continue fighting. Text 19. O Viprachiti, O Rahu, O Nemi, please hear my words. Don't fight. Stop immediately, for the present time is not in our favor. Well, that's good advice. Text 20. O Daityas, by human efforts, no one can supersede the Supreme Personality of God, who can bring happiness and distress to all living beings, all living entities. Text 21. The supreme time factor, which represents the Supreme Person, was previously in our favor and not in favor of demigods. But now that same time factor is against us. Text 22. No one can surpass the time representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by material power, by the council of ministers, by intelligence, by diplomacy, by fortresses, by mystic mantras, by drugs, by herbs or by any other means. In other words, you cannot overcome. Uh, Text 23. Previously being empowered by providence, you defeated a great number of such followers of Lord Vishnu. But today, those same followers, having defeated us, are roaring in jubilation like lions. Wow. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Bhagavad Gita mentions 5 causes of defeat or victory. Of these 5, Daiva, providence, is the most powerful. Nacha Daiva Param Balam. Bali Maharaj knew the secret of how he had formerly been victorious because providence was in his favor. Now, since the same providence was not in his favor, there was no possibility of his victory. Thus, he very intelligently forbade his associates to fight. Well, that was a very good uh, instruction. Text 24. Second. Text 24. Unless providence is in our favor, we shall not be able to gain victory. Unless providence is in our favor, we shall not be able to gain victory. Therefore, we must wait for the favorable time when our defeating them will be possible. Yeah, sometimes you have to not do something because you're not in a good position. If we have to wait for the right time. Text 25. Sukadeva Goswami continued, O king, in accordance with the order of their master, Bali Maharaja, all the chiefs of the demigods and the Daityas entered the lower regions of the universe, to which they were driven by the soldiers of Vishnu. Okay. Text 26. Thereafter, on the day of Soma Plana, after the sacrifice was finished, Garuda, king of the birds, understanding the desire of his master, arrested Bali Maharaj with the ropes of Varuna. Purport. Garuda, the constant companion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, knows the confidential part of the Lord's desire. Bali Maharaj's tolerance and devotion were undoubtedly super excellent. Garuda arrested Bali Maharaj to show the entire universe the greatness of the king's tolerance. Wow. Yeah, such a wonderful king. Purport. I'm sorry. Text 27. When Bali Maharaja was thus arrested by Lord Vishnu, who is the most powerful, there was a great roar of lamentation in all the directions throughout the upper and lower planetary systems of the universe. Text number 28. O king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vamanadeva, then spoke to Bali Maharaj, the most liberal and celebrated personality, whom he had arrested with the ropes of Varuna. Bali Maharaja had lost all bodily luster, but he was nonetheless fixed in his determination. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When one is bereft of all his possessions, he is certainly reduced in bodily luster. But although Bali Maharaja had lost everything, he was fixed in his determination to satisfy Vamanadeva, the Supreme Personality of God. In Bhagavad Gita, such a person is called Stita Prajna. A pure devotee is never deviated from the service of the Lord, despite all the difficulties and impediments offered by the illusory energy. Generally, men who have wealth and opulence are famous, but Bali Maharaja became famous for all time by being deprived of all his possessions. This is the special mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead toward his devotees. The Lord says, Yasyaham anugrinanti harisye taddanam sanai. As the first installment of his special favor, the Lord takes away all the possessions of his devotee. A devotee, however, is never disturbed by such a loss. He continues his service, and the Lord amply rewards him beyond the expectation of any common man. Wow, wonderful statement. Therefore, we should not be forlorn. We should not be defeated in our efforts because we should steadily continue in devotional service and not and understand that sometimes the Lord is going to be very favorable, and sometimes He's not going to be very favorable. But in both conditions, the Lord will always, and the Lord's activities are always transcendental. Therefore, the devotees are not disturbed either way. O King of the demons, you have promised to give me 3 steps of land, but I have occupied the entire universe with 2 steps. Now think about where I shall put my third. Well, Bali Maharaj is going to say, I put it on my head. As far as the sun and moon shine with the stars, and as far as the clouds pour rain, all the land throughout the universe is in your possession. Of these possessions, with 1 step, I have occupied Gurugurukul. And with my body, I have occupied the entire sky and all directions. And in your presence, with my 2nd step, I have occupied the upper planetary systems. Purport. According to the Vedic description of the planetary system, all the planets move from east to west. The sun, the moon, and 5 other planets such as Mars, Jupiter, orbit one above another. Vamanadeva, however, expanding his body and extending his steps, occupied the entire planetary system. Text 32. Because you have been unable to give charity according to your promise. The rule is that you should go down to live in the hellish planets. Therefore, in accordance with the order of Shukracharya, your spiritual master, now go down and live there. Ah, that looks like devastation. It is said, purport, it is said, Narayana Parasarve Na Kutaschana Bibyati Swarga Vavarga Nara Kesha Apitu Yarta Darshina. Devotees solely engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, never fear any condition of life. There it is. Never fear any condition of life. For them, the heavenly planets, liberation, and the hellish planets are all the same. For such devotees are interested only in the service of the Lord. Excuse me. A devotee engaged in the service of Narayana is always in equilibrium. In other words, he's always uh, in his position. He's not wavering this way, that way. Although he may appear to have gone to hell or heaven, he does not live in either place. Rather, he always lives in Vaikuntha. Sagunam samatitya tan ramabhuyaya kalpate. Vamanadeva asked Bali Maharaj to go to the hellish planets, apparently just to show the entire universe how tolerant he was. And Bali Maharaja did not hesitate to carry out the order. A devotee does not live alone, of course. Everyone lives with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But because the devotee is engaged in his service, he actually does not live in any material condition. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Kita janmahau yata tuya dasa. Thus, he prays to take birth as an insignificant insect in the association of devotees. Because devotees are engaged in the service of the Lord, anyone who lives with them also lives in Vaikuntha. Oh, what a beautiful statement that is. See, he's willing to live even as an insect, but in the association of devotees. Far from being elevated to the heavenly planets or fulfilling one's desire, one who does not properly give a beggar what he has promised falls down to a hellish condition of life. Text 34. Being falsely proud of your possessions, you promised to give me land, but you could not fulfill your promise. Therefore, because your promise was false, you must live for a few years in hellish life. Okay. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The false prestige of thinking, I am very rich, and I possess such vast property, is another side of material life. Everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and no one else possesses anything. This is the real fact. Ishavaisham idam sarvam jat kinja jagatyam jagat. Bali Maharaja was undoubtedly the most exalted devotee, whereas previously he had maintained a misunderstanding due to false prestige. By the Supreme will of the Lord, he now had to go to the hellish planets. But because he went there by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he lived there more opulently that one could expect to live in the planets of heaven. A devotee always lives with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, engaged in his service, and therefore he is always transcendental to hellish or heavenly residences. Thus end the Bhakti Vedanta purports of the 8th chapter, 21st chapter, the 8th canto, 21st chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bali Maharaja Arrested by the Lord. So I just want to go over one point here. The false prestige of thinking I am very rich and I possess such vast property is another side of material life. Everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And no one else possesses anything. This is the real fact. Ishavaisham idam sarvam jatkansha jagatam jagat. Bali Maharaja was undoubtedly the most exalted devotee, whereas previously he had maintained a misunderstanding due to false prestige. By the supreme will of the Lord, he had to go to the hellish planets. But because he went there by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he lived there more opulently than one could expect to live in the planets of heaven. A devotee always lives with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, engaging in his service. And therefore, he is always transcendental to hellish or heavenly residences. Well, there it is. Very wonderful statements here, showing the transcendental culture of a pure devotee. A devotee always lives with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, engaging in his service, and therefore he is always transcendental to hellish or heavenly residence, or heavenly residences. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 8th canto, 21st chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bali Maharaja Arrested by the Lord. Haribol. Okay, I think we're finished. What time is it? It's 7:30.
We are at time, Maharaj.
Huh?
We are at time.
Yeah. All right, we'll stop right there. And tomorrow we begin in Bali Maharaj surrenders his love. Wow. We should all follow the example of Bali Maharaj. Jai. Oh, glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Are there any questions or comments? Any questions or comments?
Maharaj, one question.
Yeah.
In the text 32, in the beginning of the purport, the second line says, never fear any condition of life. Devotees solely engaged in the devotional service of Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayana never fear any condition of life.
Yes.
So Maharaj, how, for a neophyte devotee, if situation changes maybe a little bit, or they can manage, but if changes more, the, they don't have a similar level of faith. So how a neophyte can be in this state, like they will never fear any condition of life.
Well, because it says here, devotees solely engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality Godhead, Narayan, never fear any condition of life. For them, the heavenly planets, liberation, and the hellish planets are all the same. That means that the devotee can live either in the heavenly planets or in the hellish planets. For the devotee, it's the same thing because he does devotional service wherever he is. So one can also do devotional service in the hellish planets as well as in the heavenly planets. That therefore the devotee can turn the hellish planets into uh, spiritual planets by his devotional service. Just like uh, we have now we've purchased the third temple, right? Well, it was uh, previously occupied by some Christians, right, who are also meat eaters. Probably somewhat in the uh, somewhat in the principle of goodness, but also meat eaters and so forth. So now we purchased that property, and there's no more meat eating, and no more Christians. Uh, it's only Krishna consciousness. So that's the life of a devotee. The devotee can live in hell and turn it into heaven by living according to the principles of Krishna consciousness. So we can take live in the most horrible place and turn it into Vaikuntha by proper uh, process of devotion service. Therefore, we don't have any fear because we know that Krishna promises to protect us as long as we do not engage in illicit activities. We stay always faithful to Krishna. And we're not afraid of any situation because Krishna promises to protect his devotee. So these are the fundamentals that keeps us steady in devotional service. Sometimes there might be uh, failure, but the devotee is not disturbed by failure. The devotee is always positive in whether there's success or failure, always positive. Therefore, he is not afraid to live in poverty, nor does he get puffed up by living in prosperity. The devotee is always thinking of Krishna. Therefore, whether in poverty or prosperity, he maintains his devotional service. Regulated principles. He's always regulated. Doesn't matter if he's rich or poor. Those are signs of a real devotee. Okay, well, I think we'll stop right there. And If there are any questions anyone would like to ask. We went to the end, right?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah, we went to the end. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 8th canto, 21st chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Bali Maharaja Arrested by the Lord. Look at all the things that are happening to Bali Maharaj. Now he's being arrested. All right. Thank you very much, my dear devotees. Please don't have any fear or any hesitation. Just be regulated in your service to Krishna and have full faith that Krishna will protect you in all circumstances. Therefore, there is no reason to be scared or hesitant. We should wholeheartedly be positive about regularly doing Krishna conscious activities, chanting, dancing, feasting. Even in the worst situations, we should not stop the chanting, dancing, and feasting because that's their culture. Okay, well, tomorrow we'll start with chapter 22. Bali Maharaja surrenders his life. You see, Bali Maharaj is not afraid. He has complete faith in Krishna. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Second, this back here.